I was watching a podcast recently by Alex O'Connor, and it had Slavoj Žižek on. Slavoj, he comes out and he says things sometimes where I don't totally get it right away, but the more I think about it, the more I start to understand what I think he meant. One thing he said that really struck with me for a good bit, and I think I finally understand it. He said that Donald Trump is a postmodernist.
Trump presents himself as, at least superficially, as some kind of a neoconservative Christian and so on, blasting against this postmodern secular permissivity and so on, referring to classical moral values and so on. But isn't it that the way he acts publicly, his performance, isn't he the worst case that you can imagine? A ridiculous case of postmodern manipulating, egotist, and so on and so on.
This is a pretty odd claim if you know anything about American politics and if you know anything about Donald Trump. Donald Trump seems to be a fairly conservative man, at least when he speaks, as he is the Republican president of the United States. However, I think when we dig into this claim of postmodernity, we can really see how it is that Donald Trump has taken pretty big portion of America by storm and why it is that he's so incredibly popular. So today we're going to look into what postmodernity is and how Donald Trump has really been able to take advantage of this cultural state and use it in order to create a fanaticism around him and his presidential campaign. First, we need to take a look at what postmodernity is. This word gets thrown around a lot. One prominent figure, Jordan Peterson, is very quick to call individuals in the academic realm postmodern neo-Marxists. This word seems fairly complex and relegated just to the realm of philosophy. However, it's not as complex as it needs to be. At least I'm going to try to explain it on fairly simple grounds. Now, postmodernity is a fairly big umbrella term, and it's like saying something is religious. There are many different thinkers and many different connotations that come with that umbrella term. When we talk about postmodernity, we might look at figures like Derrida, Michel Foucault. However, today we're going to look at Lyotard and specifically his book, The Postmodern Condition. According to Lyotard in his book, what postmodernity is the breaking down of grand narratives. At one point, we had these huge ideas that were really carrying us forward that we saw as objective truth, and they were guiding us into a particular trajectory. For instance, we had science and rationality. And what science and rationality would do was they would give us truth with a capital T. We were able to investigate the natural world with science, and this was truth. However, when we look at what's really going on, and when we look at the way that capitalism and technology has shaped our endeavors, we start to see the breakdown of these grand narratives into smaller, more fragmentary, individual, relativistic narratives. Lyotard in his book discusses how capitalism has shaped science in such a way that knowledge is not knowledge for knowledge's sake, but we now use science in order to produce something, and the value is not within the knowledge that is produced from science, but the value is rather in the utility of what science can produce for us. When we look at science, we might see that certain research endeavors are funded more regularly than others. And this may be because of what Lyotard calls performativity. How well can science perform in order to give us something of value in which we can turn a profit for? For instance, it's much more profitable to look at technological advances or the development of new medicines than it is to look at how moonlight impacts the communication styles of owls. This is really the gist of postmodernity when we get to thinkers like Lyotard. It's really how we relativize different segments of knowledge and really this breakdown of these grand narratives. Now, it's not that I believe Donald Trump is a postmodernist in that he is consciously thinking of these ideas. However, I think that Donald Trump is utilizing the cultural shift towards postmodernity in order to capture the audience and consciousness of a vast majority of individuals. One thing that postmodernity does is it has given us a meaning crisis. With the breakdown of grand narratives, there ceases to be one concrete idea of what it means to move forward, whether that be rationality, whether that be science, truth, knowledge, any of that. There's not one unifying field that allows us to propel ourselves forward. This is where religion comes in. Studies have shown that individuals are seeking out religious activity much more so now in the year 2025 than they have in the past. And I believe that this is due to the meaning crisis that has been caused by postmodern thinking and a really postmodern lifestyle. It's not necessarily that these individuals are consciously aware of this. However, it is in the cultural milieu, and it is the zeitgeist really of our current age. Even when individuals are religious, as many tend to be when they support Donald Trump, these individuals may still have a meaning crisis and a crisis of grand unification within their own lives, of how to tether all these desperate strands of knowledge in order to have a cohesive narrative. And this is where Donald Trump comes in. Donald Trump has crafted a narrative. However, this narrative, it ebbs and flows and it weaves, and it really has been able to take whatever shape is needed to take shape in order to get a message across. And while Donald Trump does not give one incredibly cohesive narrative, as we'll see when we discuss, the overall image is a cohesive one, while there are many desperate narratives within the overall message. And in this way, Donald Trump utilizes postmodernity in this relativization and delegitimization of different narratives in order to craft something where he can give individuals a sense of cohesiveness, but while still appealing to this relativism that seems to be in the air of the current culture. The delegitimization of institutions has been something that Donald Trump has been establishing since his first presidential campaign in 2016. Donald Trump came up with the term fake news, which has found its way into the cultural milieu. Fake news is a term that Donald Trump uses in order to criticize different media outlets that seem to disagree with him.
Attacking our news organization. Can you give us a chance?
Your organization
You are attacking our news organization.
Your organization
Can you give
is
us a chance
terrible.
to ask a question, sir?
Go ahead.
Sir, can
Quiet,
you state,
quiet.
Mr. President-elect,
Go ahead.
can you state
She's asking
categorically,
a question.
Mr.
Don't be rude.
President-elect, can you give us a question?
Don't be
You're
rude.
attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude.
Can you
No,
give
I'm not
us a
going to give you a
question?
question. I'm not going to give you a
Can
question.
you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir.
Now, this is not to say that the media should always be trusted 100%. However, it's looking at how Donald Trump has delegitimized this institution and how the public trust in institutions such as the media have eroded due to Donald Trump. We used to have this grand unifying idea that the media presents the truth and that we could rely on it. However, since Donald Trump has come into office, and really since he's been speaking about fake news, it's been harder and harder to distinguish what it is that is real news. We now have a fragmentary view of news. There's news on the left, news on the right, and there's alternative news now. All of these are fighting for different truths and different unifying aspects of what it means to deliver truth to their audience. Another institution that Donald Trump has seek to delegitimize is the institution of science as a whole. Now, Donald Trump may have said specific things during his terms, but I want to look at one of his appointees, RFK Jr. RFK Jr. is a man who has been elected to make America healthy again, and he has made pretty big claims, and what these claims do is they take the institution of science and they help to delegitimize them. The claims such as vaccines cause autism or that fluoride in the drinking water is bad for teeth help to delegitimize and to take away the public trusts in these institutions of science. So we can see how Donald Trump has delegitimized the media and science as institutions that have been used in order to deliver truth to the public. Another thing that Donald Trump has done is the delegitimization of his own narrative and the breakdown of grand narratives within his own speech. Things have now become relativized, and the way that language is used to create truth in any way that is viable and creates value for Donald Trump. In the same way that science is used for performativity, Donald Trump uses language for performativity to give him value whenever he seeks it. When looking at Donald Trump's rhetoric, a few different examples come to mind. The first is whenever he was talking to Christian voters on the campaign trail in 2024. He told voters, "Christians, come on out. You need to vote. I'm not Christian, but I love you."
Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You gotta get out and vote.
However, now that he's in office, Donald Trump has established a White House office of faith. Other than being a clear violation of separation of church and state, this is completely contradictory to what he said on the campaign trail. Another example that comes to mind is when he discusses Ukraine's President Zelensky. At one point, Donald Trump wrote that Zelensky is a dictator and he doesn't allow elections in Ukraine. However, after a meeting with Zelensky and the attempt to work out a deal with Ukraine, a reporter came to Donald Trump and asked if he still believed that Zelensky was a dictator, to which Donald Trump replied,
I think that Mr. Zelensky is a dictator.
Did I say that? I can't believe I said that. Next question.
The last example that I'm going to talk about is one of the campaign promises during 2024. Donald Trump said that there should have never been a war between Ukraine and Russia, that he could have ended it on day one. After day one had passed of him being in office, the war between Ukraine and Russia was still not over. A reporter had brought up to Donald Trump how he had promised to end the Ukraine and Russian war within 24 hours, and Donald Trump's response was, "I was being sarcastic."
As a candidate, you said you would have this war settled in 24 hours.
Well, I was being a little bit sarcastic when I said that. I wouldn't. What I really mean is I'd like to get it settled.
These are all rhetorical tools in order to devalue the grand unifying idea of truth within Donald Trump's speech, and in order to use rhetorical ambiguity in order to craft whatever narrative is needed for the occasion. And this is all under the guise of a grander unifying message that he can give to his voters and those who support him, such as Make America Great Again or America First. This is where Donald Trump takes postmodernism and uses it to his advantage. Donald Trump has weaponized postmodernity in order to craft meaning for his supporters in a world where we are seeing a meaning crisis. For those that have no faith in the media, science, or our government, Donald Trump is able to come in and give a grand unifying cohesive story, even though his speech is not cohesive. He's able to give a narrative that gives faith to individuals and brings meaning back to their lives. He has become the strong man that individuals have looked for to take all the fragmentary pieces of truth and put them together and create another grand unified version of truth. Like I said in the beginning, Donald Trump is not a postmodernist. He does not have a philosophical project that's dedicated to breaking down the old totalitarian, grand unifying ideas of truth that we once had in the past. Donald Trump has taken advantage of postmodern times and weaponized postmodernity in order to craft a narrative in which he can consolidate power. Donald Trump is a symptom of our culture, and until we learn to find meaning for ourselves and really break free from the chains of the past, be able to look forward and be okay with this lack of meaningful, unifying, grand narratives for our lives, we'll keep seeking out ideas from the past. We'll keep seeking out strong men who promise us these grand unifying ideas.